Hello and welcome to today's OHS Insider webinar. Our topic today is ergonomic planning for 2022, and we have Rachel Mitchell here as our speaker. I'm Rory, I will be your moderator, and before we get into the formal presentation, I'll just run through a few quick housekeeping notes. If for any reason you lose connection during the presentation, please give us a call at 1-800-667-9300. One of our representatives will be happy to help you get back online. If you're having any audio issues, please double check to make sure your device speakers are in fact turned on and that you do not have any web pages or applications also trying to use your audio. For additional resources following today's presentation, please contact Rachel at info@ergoconsulting.ca to get the slides and the recording. And finally, we will be taking questions at the end of the presentation. However, feel free to submit your questions as you think of them. To submit a question, just click on the orange arrow to expand the GoToWebinar control panel. Click the questions drop-down bar, type in your question, and hit enter. And without further ado, I will pass this off to Rachel and we can start the formal presentation.
Thanks, Rory. Am I already sharing my screen, Rory?
No, I am just passing it over to you. Sorry, 1 second. There we are.
Is it up?
Yep.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us for sort of this nice start to 2022. I thought we would spend some time talking about ergonomics program planning, both sort of generally and also in terms of some of the expected challenges of working from home and hybrid work and tight resources and all of those sorts of things. My name is Rachel Mitchell. I'm a certified ergonomist with Ergo Inc. and I've been in the field just going on 20 years now. Ergo Inc. is an ergonomics consulting company based in Southwestern Ontario. We provide ergonomic consulting services in both industrial and office environments, and since 2020 also for home offices. So in terms of what we're going to tackle today, I want to talk a little bit about the current climate that we're in heading into 2022, and then spend some time talking about what our program goals should be with respect to ergonomics. We're going to try to pull out what those keys are to a successful ergonomics program, and also kind of what those keys are, again, with respect to working from home, hybrid work, and really the sort of concept of health and wellness for employees and health promotion. As we go, I'm going to do my best to point you to ready-to-use resources that will help you build on and improve your current ergonomics program. There is almost always something that already exists out there that you can use, so I encourage you to sort of avoid recreating the wheel, try to pull resources that already exist. We know that everybody's stretched in terms of resources, and that'll allow you to really focus on your ergonomics program in the right places. So let's take a look at sort of the current climate now. So we know that there are ergonomic issues related to home offices. We know that many folks have still not really taken the time to set up workstations properly, that there is a lack of appropriate equipment, oftentimes with respect to chairs. We know a large percentage of people are still sitting on kitchen chairs and dining room chairs and things like that at home. I think there's also a lack of reporting of issues and challenges in this work from home climate. So whether it's that we are continuing to think of our home offices as temporary, and so we don't really want to raise issues, or we're afraid to rock the boat, or maybe people don't know how to raise concerns, or what they might be entitled to kind of relative to their home offices. So all of those sort of contribute to these setups that are really still not ideal. And then as part of sort of looking forward and this idea of return to the office, which as we know, we thought return to the office, would be last January and then last September and then this January, and again, kind of held off a little bit. We know that a lot of companies are looking for opportunities to decrease some of their office space requirements as a cost saving measure. And so they're looking at hoteling or shared workspaces as part of their return to the office rollout. Now that raises some questions about, how do we manage staff that are using multiple workstations? Do people need equipment for both sets of workstation? The short answer of which is yes, they do. And then how do we set up and select equipment if it is going to be shared by multiple staff? So we kind of are coming into 2022 with these kinds of challenges facing our ergonomics program. And then we have to think not just about the environment, but the people that are involved in the workplace that are part of sort of our ergonomics focus. And we know that the state of employees is such that there is decreased worker capacity. Now, that is both in terms of absences in a company, in a corporation, because people are off work due to illness, especially in January. We're seeing lots of that. But even for people who are present, we know that employees may have decreased physical capacity. So people in manual type jobs do not have the endurance, the muscle strength that they may have had previously. People have reduced their kind of physical activity, access to gyms and things like that. And then we know that people are also dealing with a decreased mental capacity. So we're dealing with more stressors, more anxiety. We've got additional responsibilities. In Ontario, our kids are home. I believe in BC, kids are home from school as well. And so all of this goes to increased workload being placed on employees, both as a result of decreased staffing and people sort of maybe not working at their maximum capacity, and then things taking longer to do. We know on average people are working 48 minutes more per day, above what they would have been doing previously. And as a result of all of this, I really do think that we've got more employees suffering from pain, discomfort, injury, and we are not hearing about it yet. So I keep waiting sort of in ergonomics for the shoe to drop with the increase in sort of reported concerns or complaints or requests for assessments, or increase in claims from some of these home office and temporary workstations. It really hasn't come through in any kind of large volume yet, but I feel like it's still there. And that maybe is something we're going to start seeing in the months to come, is people starting to report more injuries, because this toll that these poor workstations have taken on our body have really started to accumulate, over the last 2 years. And same thing for people in physical jobs who are doing more physical work at a reduced capacity, that some of that increased in injury. We have in those more manual jobs seen more injuries over the last 2 years, and some of that is people being distracted and again sort of not mind on task, as well as some of this kind of reduced physical capacity. So with those things in mind, let's look at how we start planning for 2022. What are the things that should be our focus in our ergonomics program? So at a really basic level, an ergonomics program should look to address ergonomic hazards, and it needs to look to address ergonomic hazards in the same way that you address any other health and safety hazard in your environment. So if you've got a really sort of long-standing health and safety program, and you think about, how do you address trips, slips, and falls? How do you address, chemical hazards? You take the same style of approach. It is really the idea that we have to identify hazards that are present in work. We need to implement mitigation strategies or controls for those hazards, and then we have to educate workers on what the risks are and how to effectively use the controls that are in place. Right, so this doesn't have to be a standalone program. You can roll your ergonomics program right into your health and safety program. because it's the same strategies that are in place to identify and address those hazards. And really with, the end goal of protecting workers and reducing injury. However, I think it's important that we don't undersell ergonomics by tying it too firmly to just our injury rates, particularly in places where you may have low injury rates kind of historically. We know that companies that have strong ergonomics programs generally will see improvements in productivity, will see improvements in quality, in job satisfaction, in people staying in job roles. And we need to make sure that we do a better job of, as the year gets going, tracking those other wins that we see so that we can tie our ergonomics program to other metrics in order to show the benefits. And that will help us to get more buy-in to these programs as we move forward. Now, keep in mind that the sort of exact requirements of what will be required for your ergonomics program are going to vary from province to province. In Ontario, ergonomics is covered only under the Occupational Health and Safety Act General Duty Clause. In BC, there are much more specific ergonomic requirements, and again, it will vary province to province. One of the really great resources for you to kind of put in your pocket as you head into the new year is the MSD prevention guidelines. They were created in the province of Ontario, but I know they are being used consistently kind of across the country and even outside the country as sort of models of best practice tools and strategies that are out there. So the website is at the bottom of the slide, msdprevention.com, and it's kind of a great first stop for any kind of tool or resource that you might be looking for. Okay, so I want you to think to yourself, what is it that makes for a successful ergonomics program? And if you want to throw some of these into the chat, feel free to do so. I'd love to see kind of what it is that you think makes your ergonomics programs successful. So I'll let you guys throw some of those in, and I'll start taking on kind of some of the ones that stand out to me as well. So I think the first piece to a successful ergonomics program is management buy-in, commitment, and leadership from the top. We need to make sure that management sees value in the ergonomics program. If they don't, you don't get the buy-in, and it's sort of an uphill battle the whole way you go. So this is why it's so important for us to tie ergonomics improvements to more than injury prevention, because it's productivity and it's quality, and those are the things that often management level is looking at and is focused on. And so if we can show that we have an impact on those things as well, then that really helps to strengthen the program. With that commitment, generally speaking, we're looking for resources. So resources in terms of people having time to spend on an ergonomics program, money either to have an ergonomist or have access to an ergonomist who's a consultant, or investment in making changes and improvements in a facility, that you've got people who are part of the ergonomics program who are trained in order to kind of be participating in various different roles. It's also a really good time to think about what your planning for 2022 looks like. What are the projects that you want to take on, and how can you get the management level folks who kind of control these resources involved in the prioritization of your 2022 projects? Get them on board now, make sure they see what it is you want to achieve over the year and what those resources are that you're going to need in order to get there. And then I think it's important to schedule out in your calendar maybe kind of quarterly updates where you're meeting with someone at those kind of upper management levels to say, these are the things that that we've made progress with, here are the challenges that we have, here are the things that we need in order to kind of get the rest of the way with what we've got planned, so that they are continually involved in the ergonomics program, at a kind of high level to see what's going on and to be able to assist as we, hit the inevitable bumps in the road. It's also a really good time to review and update your health and safety or ergonomics policy. So again, you don't have to have an ergonomics policy on its own. You can roll it into your existing health and safety policy, but then you need to make sure that the verbiage in your health and safety policy alludes not just to hazards in terms of, slips and falls and those kinds of things, but also alludes to what I don't like to refer to as ergonomic hazard, but a musculoskeletal disorder hazard, those kinds of kind of ergonomics related hazards. So as long as they are covered well in the health and safety policy, then that does the trick. Otherwise, you can do standalone ergo policies. There are some you can download and kind of change out company information and some of those little pieces to have a kind of working document to start with. Your policy should cover some general things. It needs to cover how you report concerns. It needs to cover how you request an ergonomic assessment, whether it's for home office or whether it's for an industrial or manual job. In terms of home offices, though, it also needs to cover things like who is responsible for what. So in Ontario, the home is not considered an official workplace in the Occupational Health and Safety Act. It does not extend to the home. So an employer is not sort of responsible for the home as part of the workplace, whereas in BC, the home is considered a part of the workplace. So there are some different variances in how this works. However, in either case, if an injury occurs due to a home office, it's still going to fall under the employer's responsibility within a workers' compensation system. So at the end of the day, you get held responsible for injury costs even if you are not responsible for the office itself in the first place. So obviously prevention is kind of the best strategy here. The other thing is with respect to equipment, your policy should cover how you request equipment. If you are moving into a system where you have 2 workstations, you work from home a couple of days a week, you work in the office, what is the expectation for 2 workstations, right? Do I get 2 sets of equipment? Am I expected to carry my equipment back and forth? The Canadian standard for office ergonomics basically says that if you're using a laptop for any extended period of time, it has to be docked with an external keyboard and a mouse. So that's a requirement at both workstations, and there should be a properly sort of height adjustable, quote unquote, office or ergonomic chair at both workstations. So how that's covered, where are there 2 sets of equipment? Where is the expectation in terms of carrying equipment back and forth? These don't always mean that you have to have equipment that's purchased, right? Monitor risers are easy to do from boxes, from upended, plastic totes. You can use copy paper as footrests. It doesn't necessarily mean that all of the equipment has to be purchased in duplicate. It's really the keyboard, mouse, and chair that need to be addressed. The other thing is that I think it's very helpful, especially when we start to get into sort of the ordering of office equipment in particular, to consider whether or not you want to pre-select equipment at the beginning of the year. So you pre-select, these are the 3 office chairs that you can order, whether it's for home or whether it's specifically just for the office. You can order these 3 chairs. If you want to order something other than these 3 chairs, you have to go through some sort of ergo rep, joint health and safety member, somebody who's got some knowledge and experience in the area. My experience over the last 20 years is that if you allow people to just order anything they want out of an office catalog, you will end up with gel wrist rests just coming out the wazoo. You'll get people ordering the prettiest chair they can find for $150, which is chrome and mesh and has only 1 adjustment lever on it. And so really there is money to be saved in ensuring that the equipment that is purchased is appropriate equipment, is well-designed equipment that is going to minimize injury, that is going to fit people properly, and that is going to last more than 6 months. So for a lot of the facilities I work with, we have created these kind of pre-selected office equipment guides or industrial stool guides. They are left with the ordering department. And so when people request things, they get given sort of this document with 3 sit-stand desks or 3 chairs or 3 stools, and they get to pick from that, and kind of that's that. So that's kind of something worth thinking about, especially if you're getting into anticipating that there'll be more ordering of furniture because of duplicate workplaces or workstations. The next piece is, we need to figure out, how to get the most amount of kind of worker participation in your ergonomics program, right? We're trying to figure out how do we give people the knowledge that they need in order to help themselves. Health and safety managers in particular in a world of COVID have so much on their plate that we don't need to necessarily take on more responsibility than we absolutely have to. And a great example of this again is kind of going back to pre-selected chairs. I don't want someone calling me every time they want a new chair. I want to just be able to have them do that on their own because I know that these are the pre-selected chairs and they only come through me if they have some specialty requirement that is outside of that. So we want to make sure that we really enable them to be as involved in the program and to really help to carry the load of an ergonomics program. The workers are the ones who see these jobs day in and day out and have the most information and knowledge about them. So there are a couple of things that we need to do. The first is we need to train employees to recognize the hazards and use the controls that are in place. We need to make sure that we encourage reporting, whether this is reporting of discomfort or injury, whether it's bringing forward new ideas through suggestion boxes. We really want to make sure that people feel comfortable bringing forward their concerns and their ideas. We know the value of early reporting. It's easier to fix. The injuries are less significant. And then obviously we want employee involvement in things like developing the solutions. So do you have a system for people to submit an idea and also submit the solution, or the rewards for submitting an idea with a solution that's easy to implement or something like that. And then, this is both for kind of general employees, and then you may sort of further train some folks to be part of your Joint Health and Safety Committee or your ergo team to be kind of more specialty members. But we want everybody involved, not just those who are in kind of an ergonomics team. We do need to recognize there are barriers to this. So remote working presents some challenges. People are not all together, and so it's sort of, we don't get the same sense of team. We have been seeing companies put their ergonomics programs on the back burner. Ergonomics doesn't always feel as pressing as other health and safety hazards because we're not talking about whether or not somebody goes home safely at the end of the day. We're talking about whether someone is, making choices or sitting in a workstation that's going to create, back issues for them, 6 months or 2 years down the road. And so there's sort of a sense that it's not as pressing. These get put on the back burner. We sort of continue to treat home office workstations like they're temporary. So, we don't get super involved in those. So I think it's really, 2 years in now, time for us to start putting this sort of more emphasis back on these ergonomics programs. And then we need to make sure that, again, people feel comfortable bringing forward their concerns and their ideas, that we try to celebrate when we have successes in our ergonomics program, because people sometimes don't bring ideas forward because they feel like no one's listening, they haven't seen changes happening. So, make the most of every change and improvement that you're able to do. That'll encourage more people to kind of want to get involved and contribute to changes that they're seeing. So if we sort of think a little bit more specifically in terms of a strong joint health and safety committee or ergo team, again, you do not need a standalone ergonomics team, but if you don't have an ergonomics team, your joint health and safety committee has to be responsible for ergonomic hazards. And that means that when they do things like inspections and are identifying hazards, that their inspection checklists ask questions about musculoskeletal disorder or ergonomic hazards, that they are making kind of an effort to identify these types of hazards as well. So someone has to be responsible for inspections in the realm of musculoskeletal disorder hazards. They have to be responsible for identifying and helping to implement controls and then gathering feedback, because we know there's always tweaks that have to be made when we implement controls. It's also a good time, if you've already got a team, to think about, who regularly came to meetings last year, who really seemed involved, who are the people who weren't on your team but seemed interested that maybe you want to pull into your team this year, those who maybe are ready to retire from your team and bring in some new folks. You want to think about who those key members are. So it's important on these teams to have someone from management, to have some workers. If you're, again, in a sort of manufacturing environment, I'd love to have maintenance and engineering, because they are the ones who are great at coming up with solutions. In particular, maintenance is really good at low cost, kind of MacGyvered solutions. Thinking about having somebody in purchasing. So again, that person who's going to be the gatekeeper of, not just being able to order anything you want out of a catalog, but having a bit of control over when we order tools, we're ordering the tools that, are a little bit more lightweight, have a little bit more, vibration reducing mechanisms in them, what kind of chairs get ordered. You need to think about where in your facility ergonomics hasn't quite taken hold, where you need to embed ergonomics more strongly, and then pull some people from that area into your ergonomics team or your joint health and safety committee in order to be more involved in that process. Now, we should be thinking about doing some kind of ergonomics training on an annual basis. And that sort of general level training should cover, what are the roles and responsibilities of employees with respect to ergonomics? How do they identify hazards in their area? What are they looking for? Making sure they understand it. How do you report, a hazard or an injury? How to use controls that are available? And then some sort of specific job role information. So whether that is in their role, in a particular job, how to use the controls that are in that job, what are the best practices for handling some particular piece of equipment, or it's, relative to their roles. So some specialty training for your ergo team, or for managers doing return to work, or for your kind of office ergo contact person, whether it's lifting training for people who are doing a lot of material handling. You want to think about kind of where that specialty training might be. So this could take form as a sort of 1 hour training that everybody attends. These days we do a lot of these trainings and they're pre-recorded, and then we're able to kind of put them up on the internet and people can do them in their socially distanced spaces at their own pace. Sometimes we break them into smaller, 15-minute modules. So there's 4 15-minute modules, kind of each on a little bit of a different topic that they do over kind of a number of weeks. There's lots of ways to do this to make it really easy to roll out. And then even the job specific training pieces, they can be done as toolbox talks, they can be done as sort of ergo or safety alerts that go up in particular departments. They might be an email that goes out to employees with here's a video of how to adjust the chair that you're sitting in. Those types of things. Again, standardized equipment and furniture makes it easier to have access to videos you can send about how to adjust a particular chair. So the worker participation, when we think about home offices specifically and people being remote, this is more likely to take the form of a webinar, either live or pre-recorded. It might be, again, these sort of instructional videos, how to adjust your chair. I will provide you at the end of this session with an office ergonomics checklist that you could use, sort of a one-pager you could give to employees to evaluate their own workstations to make sure that they're set up properly. So I will make that available to you. If we think through sort of the 80-20 rule, you train a team in-house that is capable of addressing the majority of ergonomic questions in terms of workstation setup. And then you have access to a certified ergonomist for the few complex cases that you get, somebody who's got, specific medical needs or an injury that needs to be accommodated with a workstation. So there are lots of ways to kind of tackle this home office. And we've learned over the last 2 years that if you empower employees with the information they need to improve their workstations, they can get awfully creative in terms of what their workstations look like and how they alternate between different workstations throughout the day. The real star has been the height adjustable ironing board as a standing desk or even a sitting desk over the last little while. Now, when we think forward to what a more hybrid work environment might look like, this need to empower employees to make adjustments to their workstation is also going to be really important. We know historically that when spaces are seen as temporary, people often sort of lack the motivation to set up their workstation correctly. And when they're sitting at a different workstation and equipment may vary day to day, they may not have the knowledge, all of the pieces they need to really optimize the setup of that workstation. So, you know, if I ask you to look down at the chair that you're sitting in right now, and that chair has 3 or 4 levers on it, you know, do you know what all 4 levers on your chair do, and do you know how to optimize them for your stature, or do you know what, you know, 50 to 70% of those levers do? So we can do a better job, especially when we're making investments in equipment and furniture. We can do a better job to teach people how to use those to make sure that we're getting the most bang for our buck, right? If you just order a chair or a sit stand desk and you hand it to someone, you don't actually know that they're using it to optimize their own workstation setup and minimizing those kind of stressors on the body. So we need to ensure that we provide that training. We need to ensure that when we're ordering equipment, when we're kind of thinking about how we're going to equip these more hybrid workstations, how do we pick equipment that's really going to fit everyone? Is it going to fit someone who's 5'2", and it's also going to fit someone who's 6'2"? And did our ergonomics policy that we update kind of cover how these shared equipment workstations are going to work? How, you know, if I have to transport it back and forth, what if I bike to work? You know, is there a locker that I can store things in? I like to have my snacks in my desk. You know, how do we tackle all of these sorts of things? So we should have outlined kind of the answers to those questions in our policies related to hybrid offices. Now, I did want to point out to you that we've recently launched an online office ergonomics e-learning module in collaboration with OHS Insider and Safety Now. So it's a set of 5 office ergonomic modules, each under 5 minutes long. So you get through this whole thing in under 25 minutes. It covers chairs, keyboards and mice, monitors, sit-stand desks, and has a section on stretching and wellness with animation and video clips and things like that. And you can either do them for singular individuals, or companies can purchase it in order to sort of basically roll it out to their full staff and track who's completed the webinars and sections and things like that, so that you can track completion. So those are some really great ways, new resources available to allow you to tackle that in a really quick and cost-effective way to get everybody some basic information. If you're looking for kind of longer and more in-depth training for either yourself or employees, we do have a range of webinars and in-person training options. There are some, you know, 1-hour home office webinars, some 4-hour office ergo evaluation series. So there is a link there. If you're looking for more information, I'd be happy to help you out with that. So once we have folks trained and ready to sort of recognize and equipped to recognize hazards, we need to make sure that we formalize what that process looks like to identify risk. So again, that should get formalized in our ergo policy. So who is going to do assessments? What kind of tool are they going to use? How do those assessments get requested? Should all be outlined. So generally, when we do kind of in-house assessments, they get done in teams in order to improve the kind of the objectivity and the consistency. So it might be a couple of people from your health and safety team or your ergo team who are doing those assessments. And then we need to think about kind of what are the jobs that we need to assess this year. So reactively, we take a look at our injury stats for 2021. Where did we see injuries? Where did we see reports of discomfort? And think about kind of where we might want to tackle and start making a list of those. You can even think through, you know, where are the jobs where there was a lot of turnover or areas where there were issues with productivity or quality. Those are great places to start as well. And as we start to get more proactive, it's then sort of these inspections that will feed into sort of proactively going out and inspecting jobs to identify risk, but also things like pre-start reviews. So if you're in an industrial facility, health and safety is often involved in pre-start reviews or sign-off, but there are very rarely ever any questions about ergonomics that get tackled at that pre-start. So something that you can, again, roll into a process that already exists. If you've got Kaizen or 5S programs that run in your facilities, can you roll some ergonomics questions into the kinds of checklists and audits that are already being done? So you're not creating new documentation and new activities, you're simply tacking on to things that are already being done. And this also helps to, again, sort of spread that ergonomics work and make everybody responsible for the ergonomics program rather than it laying solely in a health and safety department. So lots of strategies to tackle these. We've talked about employees doing self-assessment checklists for their home workstations. We've talked about inspections that might be done as part of joint health and safety. Again, we can roll this into Kaizen or 5S checklists. There are facilities that will do an ergo blitz with a particular focus. So in an industrial facility, maybe we, spend half an hour, the ergo team walks around and they tag with a heavy lift sticker, heavy items that are supposed to only be lifted by crane, or tagging carts that have wheels that need to be replaced. Any of those kinds of kind of blitz activities. You can do kind of promotional activities, again, through email for office staff with, tips on how to adjust your monitor height, any of those kinds of things. And then you should have a system in place in order to get an in-depth risk assessment done if need be for more complex issues. So again, virtual or in person, both happen these days. Those more in-depth risk assessments will help to more clearly define kind of where things either exceed or don't exceed guidelines and helps with the prioritization of improvements. Now, just as a kind of ergonomics reminder, when we're talking about hazards in the workplace related to ergonomics, we're really looking for areas where there are high force activities, activities that are repetitive, and things with awkward postures. And we know that the combination of the three presents much higher risk than any of those on their own, generally speaking, right? So a 20-pound lift, most people can do successfully. You ask someone to do a 20-pound lift 20 times in a row, the risk goes up. If you ask them to do a 20-pound lift 20 times in a row over their head in an awkward posture, the risk has gone up again. So it's that combination of risk factors that we're trying to get people to keep their eyes open for as they evaluate these jobs. Now, in the current climate, we need to we can't overlook the need to identify and look for psychosocial risk factors in the environment as well. So above and beyond the kind of standard force, posture, and repetition, we need to look at where there are psychosocial risk factors. So those might be things like unclear expectations about work, excessive workload, a lack of control over work, a lack of engagement kind of in the process, folks being isolated, there being a lack of collaboration in work, sort of working in a silo as opposed to with team members. And all of these things present an increased risk to mental health, which we know is already kind of under stress from the pandemic. But not only that, these increased risk factors related to psychosocial demands have been shown to actually increase the risk of the onset and aggravation of musculoskeletal disorders. So there is a close tie between these two pieces. Now, once risk is identified, we have to select what our risk mitigation strategies are going to be moving forward. So you need to think about, moving forward this year, how are you going to prioritize what needs to get done? So often we do this through hierarchy of controls. So obviously we want to eliminate a risk before we, band-aid it with some PPE. But we also need to think about kind of whether we need to implement more short-term solutions because there isn't as much funding available this year. So what can we do to kind of tide us over until, things improve? There may be more focus on those kind of low-hanging fruit, low-cost solutions right now. I would caution you to watch your reliance on things like two-person lifting, kind of with the need for social distancing and those types of things. So there are some trade-offs there. But you really need to think about, how are you going to track progress? So do you have a system where you can track, what those ergonomics improvements that you have in place this year? So I've got a facility where what are we at? January the 12th, I've got 27 active ergonomics improvement efforts. They are tracked in a system. It tags the person who's responsible for implementation, and it sends them email reminders as their kind of target dates start to sneak up on them. That, again, keeps everybody responsible for their own pieces. It sends reminders as people get behind. It's being tracked by more than one person in kind of a centralized location where everyone can see those things. So think about how you're going to track that. You should be going through these kind of active Ergo projects in all of your, again, either joint health and safety committee or Ergo team meetings as well. And then keep in mind that once these get implemented, there should be some kind of training and feedback loop. So employees need to be trained on how to use controls. And then obviously there's always, tweaks that might be needed to make a control just that little bit more effective, so that kind of opportunity for them to provide feedback and to improve things further. So let's look at what some of this sort of risk assessment findings and available controls might look like for some of the things we're likely to encounter this year. So if we think about home workstations, we know there's sometimes a lack of knowledge about how to really adjust a workstation properly. Folks at home may not have all of the same kind of equipment that they would have had in the office. We know that there are some psychosocial risks that come because there's less collaborative work that's happening. And we know there are some psychosocial risks that come from isolation of working at home. So some of the controls that we might look to put in place in order to mitigate some of these risks would be access to training. So sending folks out a checklist on how to adjust their workstation, providing them, a link with a video on how to adjust their chair, and access to a webinar about, office ergonomics in general. Making sure they have access to virtual assessments or advice if their questions do not get answered with the basic information that is initially provided. Making sure that we've provided them with chairs, external keyboards, and external mice in their environment, and then have encouraged them to use books and whatever they've got around the house as risers for their laptop and footrests and things like that. And then trying to mitigate some of the risk from the psychosocial risk factors by ensuring that there are video meetings and regular check-ins, and that we are trying to do team building and collaboration wherever possible. If we look at a hybrid workstation, we know that some of the risks that will come with that, again, relate to a lack of knowledge on how to adjust a workstation, equipment that doesn't necessarily fit everybody. So how do I accommodate someone today who's 5'2" and someone tomorrow who's 6'2"? Whether people are going to see and feel the value of spending the time to adjust their workstation properly if, again, they're only there for the day. And then, we'd like to think that by going to a hybrid workstation, we're going to get back all of this collaboration. But if I don't show up to work on the same day that my colleagues are there, because I want to work Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and they want to do Tuesday, Thursdays in the office, or we come in at slightly different times, and as a result, we don't end up sitting in the same area, how do we mitigate that risk? So again, there's this piece about training, about making sure that we've provided with people with the knowledge they need to set up workstations. I think things like laptop docking stations are going to be really helpful. So you can see in the image here, a monitor mount, but it simply allows you to snap your laptop into kind of that secondary mount, so it very easily can be sort of raised to the right height without too much fuss. And then you would just have an external keyboard and a mouse available. We want to make sure that we are facilitating the fastest and easiest adjustment of a workstation possible. The easier we make it, the more likely people are to kind of make use of it. So making sure that chairs are easy to adjust, that there's some standardization there. So once you've learned how to adjust a chair, you're kind of good most places that you go. Sit-stand workstations, have gotten a lot of sort of interest in them over the last number of years over concerns with prolonged sitting. But actually, personally, one of my favorite benefits from a sit-stand workstation is not actually in the ability to stand at these workstations. It's in the ability to customize your seated height. So a standard desk is 29 inches. That works great if you're about 6'3". For most of us though, a 29-inch desk is simply too high. It's why footrests and keyboard trays exist. Most of us find the need to either hike our chair a little bit higher or work on a keyboard and monitor arm, a keyboard and mouse tray if we're working at a standard desk because of the height of the desk. So when you implement something like a sit-stand desk, you may now allow people to customize their desk down at 26 or 27 inches high, eliminating the need to have footrests available, to install keyboard trays for folks who are a little bit more petite. So we can minimize some of our need for additional equipment by thinking through and putting those things in that really allow people to easily customize their workstations. And then maybe thinking through, how do we dedicate particular areas or have sign-up sheets so that teams can sit together so that we gain back some of that collaboration that we will have lost over the last number of years while people have been at home. Now, if we look at employee wellness at a higher level, since we know that employees are dealing with both physical and mental struggles, we can see that the potential risks come from isolation at home, decreased access to social and support networks. We know that people's social networks at work make them more resilient, that people are struggling with more workload, with increased stressors, whether those are coming from work or whether they're coming from home. And there've really been, there's been a lot of discussion over the last little while about sort of this loss of boundaries, right? When your laptop sits on your dining room table and you walk past it on weekends or at 9 o'clock at night, it's, you think, oh, I just need to send this person an email. It'd be faster to do it now than to remember to do it on Monday. So we lose these boundaries. This is where these increased work hours are coming from, because it's so easy to just do that little bit more work. So we need to think about how we address that. So there needs to be clear expectations from managers, from supervisors about what work looks like, about, is the expectation that you get your work done, or is your expectation that you sit at your desk between, 8 a.m. and 4 p.m.? What kind of flexibility, can we build into work in terms of when people are in or out of the office, which days, what hours they choose to work? People may now want to flex hours so they can pick kids up from school at the end of the day. Lots of people have kind of given up their daycare over the last couple of years. And we need to really be careful about how we select those performance measures. Again, more in terms of, whether you get your work done or whether you sit at your office, for specific hours. I have heard some stories about people being really creative and, either asking other family members to move their mouse around periodically during the day, or, building these rigs that sort of move the mouse around sporadically so it looks like they're at their desk, even if they're, gone out for their lunchtime run or something like that. So we really need to think about, what is the message here to employees? What is it that's really important for us as a corporation in terms of how we measure people's performance? And then again, how do we build team and how do we build community so that people are comfortable, so that we can get those collaborative social networks back in place that make us stronger and more resilient people, that will help us to retain those employees who have expertise that is helpful to us. And again, just making sure people know about employee assistance programs, how to access them, that those things are available. So I think, those are kind of the important pieces to consider. Now, the last thing that I wanted to talk about is an audit of your ergonomics program. So I think it is a worthwhile exercise to do an annual audit of your ergonomics program. I generally do them in December, but no reason, there's no time like the present. But it's a great way to identify any kind of gaps in your program that you can then kind of build your plans for 2022 around those gaps. So this can be done internally by someone who's knowledgeable in ergonomics alongside somebody on your management team or your ergonomics team who knows the program well, or it can be done by someone kind of outside of your facility. You can have an outside ergonomist audit your program, but really you're looking to gather sort of stakeholder feedback on the program's progress, on the process, on what works, what doesn't work. You need to review kind of what the goals are of the program. Are you getting there? Did you meet your goals in 2021? You know, where is it that you're bumping into challenges in accomplishing those things? What are the training needs? When's the last time employees were trained on ergonomics awareness? And then you report out on your areas for improvement. It may also provide you with some information that then needs to go into some of your policies and procedures as well. And we need to think about gathering information kind of from all levels of our stakeholders. So, you know, there may be questions in your audit that get asked of employees, that get asked of managers, that get asked of upper management. So there are resources available to make it really easy to get these things done. So this is a sample audit. This is an audit that's several pages long. This particular page is taken from their Foundation for Success section. It comes from the older MSD prevention guideline. So it exists not on the MSD prevention website, but as part of their original PDF MSD prevention toolbox. We do have it saved on our website, so you can access it through the link that is available there. But this is, you know, got a number of questions about whether or not you have the foundational pieces that you need in order to be successful. So, you know, is senior management demonstrating their support by participating in training? Do you have policies and procedures? Have you incorporated ergonomics and prevention into your purchasing policies, into engineering design standards, so on and so forth? And you're really looking to audit a number of different components. So in this particular audit tool, there are sections kind of for training, there's sections for risk, policies and procedures, you know, all of those kinds of things. So really great source to identify where those gaps might be to help you plan for what it is that you'd like to do this year. So that's sort of the end of what I wanted to tackle today. So I realize there's some things that I've promised you as handouts as we work through here today. So if you'd like to jot down the email that's here, info@ergoconsulting.ca. If you send me an email, I will send you the following things. I'll send you the slides from today. And I will send you the computer workstation ergonomic checklist. So this is a checklist that either an Ergo team member could do or could be used as self-assessment, but questions about your own kind of office workstation setup that you kind of go through and tick off. And then I'll also send you this information card, the laptop ergonomics toolkit card. This is a card actually that I recently printed for a client, and we're going to post one at every workstation in their facility. In particular, we're doing it in part because they've recently installed sit-stand desks. And what we discovered through the installation of the sit-stand desks is there's this real tendency to want to set the sitting height at 32 or 34 inches, like much higher than a standard desk. And then people are reporting discomfort kind of with shoulders and neck because the sort of instinct is to set the desk much higher. So in order to make sure that this information is sort of front and foremost when people sit down at their workstations, we're going to be posting these cards at each workstation. So I'll provide you with a copy of that as well. I'm happy to take questions. Lots of other resources available on our website, so I'd encourage you to head over there. You can click the link to join the newsletter, and then you'll get kind of articles as we publish them. But otherwise, I'm happy to take questions from you guys.
Thank you, Rachel, for another fabulous presentation. As mentioned, we are going to open the floor up to questions. So just as a reminder, to ask a question, all you have to do is click on the orange arrow to expand the GoToWebinar control panel. Click the questions drop-down bar, type in your question, and hit enter. The first question I have in here for you, Rachel, how would you go about including a workplace stretching program to manage MSI risks?
Okay. So I think that you need to think about what kind of jobs you're looking to target with your stretching program. So there are facilities that will do, if we're talking about industrial environments, will customize kind of what is in a stretching program. depending on the department. So if you've got an area that's got, more material handling, that maybe there's more, upper body and sort of full body back stretching type of things, whereas you might have a secondary department that does grinding, that's doing more hand intensive work where you're going to customize the stretching to their hands. So I think it's important to make sure that that stretching program feels relevant to the job that you're targeting. If it's office, you can do kind of, again, stretches that are a little bit more designed for the office. And then when you roll these things out, it's important to know that you need to make sure that people understand kind of where the value is and what the benefit is. So you're not just providing the stretches, but you're saying, we're doing this to increase, body awareness, to encourage you to, get out of your chair throughout the day and change postures, that we're encouraging you to do these stretches, in a more industrial environment. It might be, at the beginning of each of your, 2 breaks during the day. It might be a once a day thing. They sometimes get rolled out as little video sections that a department can play. It might be reminders that pop up on your computer. It might be a poster that's posted at a particular workstation. I will just say, with respect to stretching programs, I do have facilities that we have designed stretching programs for. There's about an equal number of research studies that show that stretching programs reduce injuries and that stretching programs don't reduce injuries. And I think really the main value in a stretching program is it really helps to improve employee awareness, kind of self-awareness of body posture and health and wellness. I think we just need to be careful that we recognize that if you've got folks lifting, 60-pound items throughout the entire day, that no amount of stretching is going to reduce the risk in that job, because the task itself inherently has risk, and that we need to mitigate that risk in a different way. But if you're using stretching to kind of complement other risk mitigation strategies, then it is a really great way to sort of promote employee wellness in a general way.
Great, thank you. Next question is, how do you recommend assessing work from home setups?
So I think that work from home is best done through general education, followed by a self-assessment checklist. So you provide employees with access to education about what it is they're trying to achieve. So whether it's a information sheet, whether it's a 30-minute pre-recorded webinar that they can watch, or a 60-minute webinar that they sit in and can ask questions in. So you provide them with the education, you give them a self-assessment checklist, and then you give them a strategy to address anything that gets flagged in the self-assessment checklist. So if they do a self-assessment checklist that identifies that their chair is not supportive because they're sitting on a bar stool in their kitchen, you're going to need to have thought through how it is that you're going to address that risk when they identify it. So make sure you're prepared to deal with the cans of worms that you're opening. But that's really the best way to do it, is kind of this I would say 3 tiers. So education, self-assessment checklist, and then access to someone if they cannot address their issues on their own. So access to kind of a specialized person, health and safety person, ergo person, whoever it might be. And sometimes that follow-up with someone who's specialized might be a video call with somebody who's able to then see the workstation and provide a little bit more kind of information and feedback to them. So it could be done that way as well.
All right. I know we've asked this question in a different webinar, but I'll ask it again. What are your thoughts on chair headrests?
Okay. I don't know. Can you guys see? I have one and I tucked it behind me. Chair headrests are not a necessity. So people who think their chair has to have a headrest are mistaken. They do not need a headrest. That being said, there are people who have neck issues and really find that head support is helpful. So I'd say there is a time and a place for headrests. The other time and a place that headrests are useful are people who are monitoring walls of monitors. So picture security, control room type folks. people who have to look up at some kind of wall of screens, because as soon as you recline substantially, then now your head has to be supported. So a headrest is appropriate for those. I would caution you though to be very careful with the headrest, and that is that if your headrest is not articulating, so on my chair, I don't know if you guys can see, but I can articulate and move my headrest, which means I can put it kind of at whatever is the perfect place for me. If you have a chair that simply goes straight up, or the headrest, you can't manipulate the position of it, women in particular who put their hair in a ponytail will find that they have to sit with their head thrust forward because the ponytail and headrest sort of interfere with each other. So a headrest can put you in a more awkward head position if you cannot customize what's behind you. So as a general rule, I don't pick chairs with headrests unless there's a specific reason for it.
Thank you. Um, and continuing on the chair topic, roughly how often should a chair be changed out?
It depends on how much you spent on your chair. So, you know, Global and Ergocentric make great quality chairs here in Ontario. I realize I'm speaking to Ontario, but anyways, here in Ontario, their chairs are warranted for 10 years. And I have seen their chairs still going. I mean, maybe not particularly pretty, with dirt and things on them, but still going 15 years down the road. Like I've seen Global chairs that are 15 years old, no issues. Sometimes the cylinders are still fine, and the only thing that starts to go is the armrests start to chip. And at some point, you'll notice that the foam feels like it's gone on the chair, and you're kind of bottoming out when you sit down, and the seat feels really hard. So your chair's really good until your cylinder starts to migrate down on its own. The chair gets really hard because the foam has broken down, and sometimes the armrests start to chip away a little bit, which is really just an aesthetic thing. However, if you are purchasing, you know, a $150, $250 chair from an office supplier, it is not going to last you that long. You might get 2 or 3 years out of a chair like that. In particular, inexpensive mesh chairs, what you'll find over time is the mesh starts to stretch. And what you need to pay attention to is as the seat starts to stretch, you'll start to be able to feel the plastic edging around the mesh. And when that plastic edging starts to put pressure on the underside of your thighs or like on the side of your shoulders, that'll be the indication in chairs like that they're ready to be replaced. Also, sometimes the cylinders on those chairs, they start to like drift down over the day. But how long a chair lasts really is more about how expensive a chair is and how well constructed it is.
Thank you. Can you just repeat the chair companies again?
Oh, the chairs that I like. So the chairs that
Yeah.
I like are so I think it's Global Furniture Group is what it's called. It's based in Ontario in North York or Richmond Hill. They make great chairs. My favorite chair made by Global is the Global Obisform Comfort chair. Ergocentric also manufactures chairs in Mississauga, Ontario. They make an air-centric chair and a tea-centric chair that are both beautiful. Their air-centric chair is part of a home office promotion and has been for about the last year and a half. But you can, if you search Ergocentric and home office, there's a discount on that particular chair. But we are talking chairs in the $500 range.
Great, thank you. Next question here. Would you suggest doing a 3, 6, and 12-month follow-up session with your clients to ensure they are deriving maximal benefit from the ergo recommendations and changes?
If you've got the time and resources, absolutely. But I would say generally speaking that is often not done. If you're the on-site ergonomist at a facility, then absolutely, you do an assessment for someone and I would check in with them a month later and make sure things are improving. And probably after a month, I just say, here's my information. If you have further questions and you need anything, let me know. Because there's only so much of any given person to go around. But yes, a follow-up, particularly in that like beginning chunk, is really worthwhile. It's really more of a resource question.
Makes sense. All right, we have one more. What are your thoughts on BIFMA compliance?
Okay, so BIFMA is a furniture standard. It outlines the requirements for furniture to be certified according to the BIFMA standard. So a BIFMA standard might say that in order to be certified, a sit-stand desk needs to adjust from 26 inches high to 45 inches high. I'm making numbers up here. And a height adjustable desk that doesn't adjust in that range is not going to be BIFMA certified. The BIFMA standards are based on human anthropometrics. And so, in fact, a sit-stand desk that adjusts from 26 inches to 45 is going to fit almost everybody. You can buy lots of sit-stand desks that start at 29 inches and only go to 42, which means if you're short, they're too tall, and if you're super tall, they're not tall enough. And so a piece of furniture indicating that it is BIFMA certified should give you some confidence that it is going to fit a wider range of people than a piece of furniture that doesn't say that it's BIFMA certified. There may be exceptions to that, but generally speaking, I would say that it is a worthwhile thing to look for.
That must have sparked another question here. Um, Someone says they've had quite a few requests for people asking for the stand-up desks. Just how effective are they? When I look at the person's desk, it is not set up appropriately, but it's difficult to convince people to change their desk setup because they'd prefer a standing desk instead.
Okay, so I mean, there's a whole can of worms here. So standing desks, I think, are a bit of a novelty in terms of the desire to stand. Historically, what we find is people who get standing desks, generally speaking, are going to end up standing for less than an hour a day. People find standing is fatiguing. Most people will find that standing creates the onset of fatigue and low back pain faster than sitting does. There are exceptions. So people with medical history, right? Someone who had a car accident who tells you, I really can't sit for more than an hour, like they're the perfect candidate for a sit-stand desk. Somebody who's like, I'm uncomfortable at my desk and therefore would like a sit-stand desk, I generally try to convince somebody that what I'd like to do is adjust their workstation properly for them and have them try it for a couple of weeks, and then to follow up with them and see whether that's still something we need to do. Because at this point, what you're trying to separate is the need to do from the nice to have. And then it's really a management decision about whether you're providing sit-stand desks to the people who would like to have them, but don't necessarily need them. Now, again, I like a sit-stand desk because you can customize sitting. And so I really like that you can get a desk height that's 27 inches tall instead of 29. So there are benefits to them that people don't stand as much as they think they're going to stand. I think that part is a novelty. I think I answered that. I was just thinking whether there was something else I wanted to come back to. You'll let me know if I didn't answer all of that.
That's great. Thank you. And that looks like all the questions we have for today. So thanks again, Rachel, for a great presentation and for answering all our questions here.
No problem. And
Um,
if I didn't answer what anyone was trying to ask me, feel free to send me an email and I'll make sure that I get you the right information.
yes, and just a reminder to request the slides and any other additional resources, please contact Rachel at info@ergoconsulting.ca. And thank you all for attending today. If you have any other questions regarding today's presentation, please don't hesitate to contact webinars@bondguard.com. I hope you all enjoyed the presentation and have a very safe and healthy day. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.